Welcome, beloved hearts, into the loving embrace of the divine. I would like to invite you to bring your awareness to your heart, where we can truly connect as one. I am Katrina Armstrong, and I stand before you today as a testament to the power of the divine. I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth, all of which has birthed the alchemical movement that is Divinity in Action, that I am ecstatic to share with you here. Allow us to guide you through the wisdom of our esteemed leaders and uncover the secrets of the universe to unlock your true potential, as I had done in my life when I embraced the Christ consciousness and ascended into higher expressions of my soul potential. I'll share with you the teachings and wisdom that have helped me to transcend from my earthly bounds and realize the true expression of my soul. I'll be joined by some of the most compassionate and authentic spiritual leaders worldwide who also experience divinity in action. Allow us to share our insights and experiences. I invite you to join me on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth. Together we'll break free from past programming and conditioning and fully embrace our true selves. Join me in welcoming Elizabeth Wood. Elizabeth is considered an advanced seer. She works on the cutting edge of galactic and quantum anthropology, trauma healing, and futurism. With her lifelong ability to see into and work with all dimensions, her theoretical and psychic work has helped people all over the world. Called Living Library and Oracle, Elizabeth has spent her whole life studying anthropological theory, quantum physics, ancient and modern medicine. She has 2 science degrees, including a master's in applied anthropology. Her philosophies and practices bridge science and spirituality to support real changes in the world. Hello, beloved hearts. How wondrous and splendid and playful it is to have Elizabeth with us here today. I am so intrigued and excited for all that is already transmitting through our time together. And I know everyone listening, as you're tuning in to Elizabeth's words and as she defines the divine for us and takes us into this, I feel we're going on a journey. I feel it's going to be an experience. So I am honored, so honored to have you here with us. I can feel how much you really embodied the divine and how much of a gift it is to have you here with us.
Wow, that's so kind. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your gracious channeling of the divine feminine. Very powerful.
Yes. Yeah. It's so beautiful when we feel into the divine within us. And when we look at how do we define this? How do we give this words that can really land, that allows our mind and our body to make that connection once again, that I feel may allow us to kind of sink deeper into all the changes that are here for us. Would love to begin here with you with how do you define the divine?
Yeah, this is the fun part because it's a trick question. It's a trick question because you can't really. The divine is something that can't be named. It's sort of like the Tao. The Tao that is named is not the Tao. So what we can do, however, is do a journey. We can take a walk around what is the divine, and we can get really, really close to that 0 point, that place of definition. You can get really close to it. But the beautiful part is because it is from which all arises, the only time you really end up becoming one with it is when you give up any of your own identity and your own definitions and your own beliefs. So we have this chance to actually be individuals and see our facets of reality and appreciate that every single part of consciousness is a window into that divinity. That's the kaleidoscope part of the multidimensionality part of what is the divine. And that to me is where I like to hang out and examine reality from that vantage point.
Absolutely. I love this as you're speaking it. It's really taking me into that place of what I would call like continuous surrender, letting go of identity, letting go of how we have to define things. And perhaps it's there for the moment and we get to be with it. And I feel in my experience, that's one of the gifts that we have here, is that we get to be with what is there in that moment. And I know that can be scary for a lot of people when they're going through changes, when they're making these kinds of shifts and they're returning back, back to the divine within them, where we find ourselves shifting out of how we've viewed our own individuality. And, it's definitely my experience that to have that willingness to continuously shift that perception, if you will, to see something new. How is it you feel one can do that? Or how do you guide others to be able to see reality through those lenses?
I use specifically the dimensions. And in mysticism and in science, which I like to balance both of them, I see mysticism as a type of science. And it's kind of its own body of work. It's the study of consciousness and how to navigate consciousness. And so passed down through a lineage and many lineages, but in particular, the one that I come from, which is a Tibetan Buddhist lineage, there's an understanding of 12 dimensions of consciousness. And it's cool because as an anthropologist, I'm aware that this idea is actually well known in consciousness. And there's the Kogi and the Shuar native people here near where I'm at in Ecuador who see the same things. And to be able to have this universality to consciousness is very spectacular. And I just want to bring people's attention to two parts of this 12-dimensional reality that we're in. First, knowing that it comes from your body. So you're going to experience the divine through your body all the time. That's part of the individuation experiences. This is the Elizabeth book, and this is the Elizabeth vantage point this time. And as a soul, which is moving through all those dimensions to give you your vantage point, as a soul that comes from the divine, I'm tasked to understand this reality through this vantage point. So how does it get split up? Because it's complicated at first. And so in the dimensions, we have these places or these expansive awarenesses. It's more expansive rather than higher or lower dimensions. It's more like an open floor plan. Yeah, and I find it to be more accurate because you don't lose the other dimensions that you've embodied and really got a handle on when you get to the bigger space. So I like to bring people's attention to the first and second dimension because we tend to not talk about them at all. And I hear people talk about 3D, 4D, 5D a lot, which is great, but those are more familiar to people than the first and the second dimension. The first dimension is as close to the divine, the source of divinity, as is the 12th. But the first is closer to you than the 12th. It is your presence. And like you said, finding it for ourselves. Well, I would say go deeper inward, go into your I am existent presence, and you'll be closer to the divine from there than having to, say, work your butt off to the 12th dimension, which you can do and you should, because it's really amazing what you're going to learn from all of that. But to start from the I am presence, the knowing that the divinity is in you and animating you too as this extraordinary soul, gives people the prowess and the guts to take it all the way through these other bigger, more expansive dimensions. So that's the first piece. And then getting people to recognize what is the earth actually embodying now? Because the earth, she's on this really cool journey through space, and space is extraordinarily diverse in frequency like we are in consciousness. And so the earth has actualized what we know as the 9th dimension. And this is amazing because the name of the game for the 9th dimension is unconditional love. But everyone thinks that this is going to be really pleasant. Even though they don't realize that unconditional love is really radical. It's actually requiring you to look at the things that you would say, I don't like this, I don't want this is terrible, suffering is bad, and to completely switch up your whole attitude about reality and recognize that all things exist in unconditional love, that there's only one reason why anything is loved into existence, and that's because it exists at all. So then we can't see the problems and the trials and tribulations and suffering anymore as something that cannot be loved. And that's really tough. And it's really especially hard in the inner journey to show up and say, well, how have I not loved myself? And these are the two pieces that are coming up for our audience right now, I believe, is to really get anchored in the I am presence in the second dimension, which is the network of the I am presences, the Indra's net. It's the real internet. There's Indra's net, INDRA, and it's an ancient concept, but in the real internet, you are perfect. You're loved. And to feel those two things from the inside is going to help you to acclimate to what Earth is giving you now in the ninth dimension, in this true unconditional love, this field, this playing field. And it can be extraordinary what will happen to you. And I've been given the opportunity to acclimate to this beforehand. And it was really hard, because I found so much of myself that I did not love. And it's completely changed me. It's really changed my body and how I've been able to experience reality. So bringing it back to the personal, what can happen to you on the other side of embracing these two pieces right now?
Wow, there is so much in everything you just said. I just want to take a moment to take a breath for everyone to receive that. And I can fully relate to, going into that. And my journey was, being taken through a radical transformation to come from above 12th in. So to be in that space of everything being frequency. And, learning how to be here. And a lot of what I found is exactly what you're saying. The foundation levels, the first and the second, that we oftentimes see as less than, that are so important for being able to really embody and anchor this, to be able to actually actualize it through this vessel, through this beautiful elemental body that we have. And I love that you brought up the ninth dimension, because that was the place where I began greater communication with the earth. And it's incredible, the journey just through your words that you're taking us on here. So I'd like everyone just to take a moment to feel that first and second, and where that is within you, and how significant it is, as much so as the 12th or the 13th, or, so many people have different ways of defining and looking at this. And I love that you spoke about what I was hearing is the divine as a field. And my experience is watching or a lot of my work has been allowing these dimensions to integrate, to form into one. So we're returning it fully into this now, so we can experience all of them. And I know you spoke a little bit about that in the beginning as well, of being able to be with the divine, being able to engage, embody, and how important it is that we are touching all of these dimensions. Because I know at a 12th, 13th, I was at a place where emotions actually were not there. Like, not like in a pulling myself out of it, but they literally did not exist. And I remember asking for them back. Like, oh, well, how will I be able to really enjoy being here in this body? If I'm operating, in a 12th dimensional level. And I know that a lot of times that's what we're seeking, right? We want to ascend. We want to, this idea of ascension, or we want to reach enlightenment. And my experience is once you reach that, you're coming right back in.
It's a whole other journey.
So I would love to know, how can we touch into this field of the divine, and how do we discover this purpose of why it is that us individually we're here? Because I think it's so easy for us to get, wrapped up in or be pulled into so many others' agendas or ideas. Mm-hmm. How do we anchor that for ourselves and work in that?
I think first and foremost, people need to be able to learn how to meditate. And it's something I'm terrible at personally, because all my energy is here in my third eye. So being in my mind and being caught up in the phenomena that I perceive with my psychic abilities, and believing that that phenomena is the end all be all, right? And we could also say that the mind or emotional body too, as empaths out there working from the heart space and the heart field, people get caught up in the phenomena. They get caught up in the stories. And then they continue to believe that those stories are real. that they're the only definition of reality. And so this is really important to be able to get really, really still in the mind and the consciousness, stilling the whole form. And I actually like to do open-eyed meditation because it forces my mind to have something that has a phenomena to it, a form to it. It forces my mind to focus. And if you do open-eyed gazing meditation, especially at the Sri Yantra, there's been a lot of scientific data that backs up that this is a very powerful way to get into very great states of meditation that's very fast. And you're also not supposed to do it for super long, and trying to sit for more than 20 minutes for myself is quite difficult. But I can do it for like 5 or 10 minutes and have that done maybe a few times a day. And it can be very powerful and swift in that it takes me really deep into the non-phenomena, and it actually changes the way you see because all the micro movements of your eyes stop and everything turns to pure light. And so you actually experience the mind level phenomena of this beautiful 12-dimensional space, like you're seeing this sort of place of nothing, this glorious nothing. And it can be very powerful because then you're accessing the I am present and you're accessing the 12th at the same time. And when you do that, then the I am presence merges with what we are calling the divine, this source divine energy, and you stop any sense of yourself. And this is what's known as nirvikalpa samadhi, these very, very difficult to attain states of consciousness. And yet there is a sort of shortcut to it by kind of hacking what the body's capable of. So an empath can do this. And if you're noticing, and so beautifully the way you described it, Katrina, where is this I am presence coming through you? It's actually different for everyone. It's incredibly unique to each person. For me, it's the high third eye. And this is why like all my energy is right here in this 2 inches of my body. They're being embodied and getting into the first and second and structure and form, and being in the body fully has been my great balancing act, my great task. And so for like my empath friends out there, it's quite scary for them to feel like they can connect to these other realms that I'm like, no, it's easy. And they're terrified. So just everyone's so unique in this, and people are going to notice, wow, my energy's coming through a very different spot of my body than I thought it would. The other way to sort of connect to the divine, I believe, is to keep practicing what I call the bird's eye view of reality. And this is such a psychic person type way of describing things. This is from a psychic's perspective. But it can be a very good first step into a more astrally comprehensive life. But when you're in discussion, and start with things that are pleasant, and when you're with people that you care about, try to view your discussion or even if it's just really simple, maybe you're doing dishes with a friend after dinner, or maybe you're out with friends at a restaurant, or whatever, and you kind of rise up above your consciousness. You pretend that you're floating above everybody. And I find that this actually gives me a very different vantage point of who we are. I'm able to perceive that the people in front of me, while they might temporarily believe that they are Katrina or they are Elizabeth, I can see for myself that they're not. And by the simple ability to have a bird's eye view on anything, and this becomes very, very handy when you're in arguments or confrontation, because then you're having a soul-to-soul discussion. You're speaking past the ego, past the drama, past the identity, and you're speaking to someone's soul because you can feel their soul more than you can their personal self. And so even if you can just sort of do that with your heart space and you're not necessarily seeing it, though imagination is the gateway into all these perceptions, all you have to do is imagine it to be so. This is how you do psychic seeing. It's really that simple. But being able to then feel it, to feel the bigness, the presence, that I am presence from that first dimension, and honor it and love it just as much as you would the source of the divinity of all of reality in the 12th dimension. And this starts to balance things out so that you can feel feelings, you can feel whatever is moving through you, but then you're not attaching to it. It doesn't have anything to hit anymore. So then you're not in this space of null feelings and energy or overwhelmed with feelings and energy like in the 3D, but rather a bit in between. So you're becoming more formless, and then you're going to have an easier time perceiving divinity everywhere and all the little things and all the big things, and perceiving reality as something you're navigating, and that the divine is there as your great cheerleader waiting for you to just ask. That's the last piece, is just ask. If you want to find the divine, then ask. People don't ask. They just don't ask. They don't realize they can ask. It's one of those beautiful hacks of reality. Just ask and let your question resonate through reality, and you will be able to see the results of those questions. It's an extraordinary task to be able to learn how to ask. So those are the ways that I personally connect to the divine.
I love this. When you speak about the bird's eye view I work with, and you even said soul to soul, communication. And I feel so grateful that in my beginning, that was one of the first places that I went, or it would have been extremely confusing for me to operate here, but to find that middle ground where I can be, especially empaths. And I know there's so many of them here that are tuning in with us, to be able to honor what you're feeling and be in communication from a higher level allows for you to be even more discerning and what is yours to do in that moment, and also I find that this movement, what I call from empathic to multidimensional, when you make these connections, you start to be able to tune in and understand things. So I love that you brought us there. You brought us to that place, and this feeling that I keep getting of being in connection with what you speak of as the first dimension, and the ability for us to do that with the 12th and the first at the same time. And that's where I found the most treasuring, most beautiful things in my life. We can hold both of those at once. And what I call neutralizing polarities, it starts to break things down to where we can see it with clearer eyes. And when you said ask, I just hear the words divine intervention. Divine intervention. And I don't know how many times I've been on my knees and I'm like, divine intervention. I have no idea what's next. I don't know what to say. But every time it's answered, every time. And it's so beautiful that you're bringing that up, because you're giving us right now a powerful tool. And I know we want it to be grandiose. We want it sometimes to be this like massive thing process, because it seems like all of life are these processes, when it's these simple things like, ask, divine intervention, that I've found has just kept opening it up more and more. And I'm also appreciating how you shared with us a very important piece about imagination and our psychic abilities. And, a lot of my work is bringing people deeper and deeper into what I call their divine child, and the one that holds the keys to being able to operate here. And when we look at our imagination, that we've been trained a lot of times that it's not real. And my experience is that a lot of our imagination is very real. So it's really neat that you're bringing that up as well. So I know that as we're like moving through this, sometimes we can have things that don't feel good or feel like they're distorting our realities, as we're making these connections. Is there any practices or ways that you have found that help us shift that, the distortions in these fields with the divine?
That's a good question. You brought up collapsing, or what you said, dissolving or something like that, polarities. And that's also in the practices that I like to work with, because if you can start to see that whatever we are, if we go to any sort of extremes, we draw in things that are the opposite of that. And coming to neutral, or the middle way, as is so well loved, that concept of the middle way, being able to appreciate all the polarities that are showing up. Distortion's part of a polarity too. And distortion's one of the most powerful polarities right now. And there's 6 of them in particular that work with sort of what I call 5 programs or 5 fields of consciousness that we're all starting to really get clear on. And they're tricky. Some of these fields of consciousness have to do with things like money or time. These ideas that people, or that there is any depth, ideas that tend to run people's lives and can cause them to feel like they're surrounded in processes all the time. So to be able to navigate that part of reality, which is very interesting because the whole universe, half the dimensions in at least the tradition that I'm working in, half the dimensions have polarity and half of them don't. So it's built into the bigger picture for us to navigate polarities. So first, not to feel like your life's supposed to be so middle ground forever and ever all the time. And not to feel guilty or beat yourself up or blame anybody for the fact that processes and polarities are showing up and sometimes stacked on one another in very dramatic ways, even to the point of like life and death type reality. So when you realize, oh, it's built in, and it gives you an opportunity to question some of these fields and how distorted they are. So distortion is really part of this understanding of this polarity. And that's why I said stillness is so key. So, that stilling your mind through meditation helps you to balance out what's inevitably around you, which is distortion. And this distortion comes from lots of places. It can come from people's trauma and personal stuff. It can come from within your own trauma. And then it starts to play trauma ping pong with other people.
There are a lot of people who felt that way.
Exactly. Trauma ping pong. And it's rough because it's very structured. So if you feel like there's structure around you, or you feel like you're trapped, or you feel like that certain things just really hit you hard and trigger you, well, this is what you're here to learn about. And there's a fast but difficult way to get through these things, to be able to neutralize distortion. You're not going to do it by building castles and barriers and shields around you. You won't do it that way. Those are only ever temporary. And a lot of times they call in more stuff, because then if you put this big, huge shield up or castle of energy around you, you're kind of letting yourself be known that you're ready for battle. And so you don't necessarily want to do. You want to be able to reach this gift of divinity, which is divine neutrality. We have this divine intervention, divine timing, divine neutrality. And there's many gifts of the divine understanding is another one that we don't talk about much. But divine neutrality, you get through it, you get to that point. It's a breakthrough, because then stuff doesn't perturb you and you're not playing distortion ping pong or trauma ping pong anymore. But you can observe the distortion, you can have compassion for it, yet it's not going to bother you. It's not going to be difficult for you to navigate it anymore. And how do you do that? Well, actually, you have to stand in it. You got to go stand in the distortion. You got to stand in it, shower in it, and be like, I'm going to get to know this distortion so well that it doesn't even bother me anymore. And this is why people don't want to do it this way, even though it's a super fast, difficult way, but super fast way to have these breakthroughs. You find your fear, you find your discomfort, that whatever's being presented, it could be really small stuff. Like, I get really irritated when my dishes aren't done. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh, my kitchen's dirty. So I'd go stand in that energy and I'd let it irritate me until it felt really unbearable. And then that's your clue. When you get used to this process, you notice it more intently and you can get to the unbearable point faster. It feels unbearable and an unbearable irritation. And then finally you're like released from it. You're surrendering to the irritation so fully in your body, in your emotions, that you end up becoming one with it. We call it merger. And not everybody likes that word because they don't want to merge with, say, bad people or evil things. And that makes sense. But you don't need to merge with people or things. You want to merge with frequencies that feel like emotions. And not all frequencies feel like emotions. It can elicit certain emotions for people. So while I'm really irritated about dishes in the morning, that might not bother most folks at all. And they're going to have their own reactions to these things. So the standing in emotion so fully that you become one with it is the ticket to being able to find this divine neutrality all the time. And it becomes a lifestyle. It's upkeep. You're not going to come to an end as it's a task that you do every day, like brushing your teeth. You're finding the energy around you. Yes. But that gives you more and more clarity faster and faster, and it cleans up your emotional body. It cleans up your genetic trauma. It cleans up personal stuff to the point where you're actually really enjoying yourself all the time, even when stuff's really wretched around you. But you're exuding, you're radiating presence and joy, you're radiating divinity. And that lifts the whole scene up. And you start to see miracles. So I believe in this way of working. It's been very beautiful to watch myself and others work this way.
I call this emotional mastery. And I really appreciate, one, that you've gone here with it, that this is, because I know a lot of people don't feel as courageous or as brave. And a lot of times they'll pull back when it's like, oh, but just lean into it, just step in. And I see emotions as constructs. And what I found over time of doing what you are giving us right now, which is so powerful, so everyone really take this in, is that these constructs begin to take new forms. They begin to communicate differently. And a lot of my work has been what I call living structures. So seeing what these are becoming as we're evolving into this new species and being able to communicate with them. And, when we find ourselves in that space and we cultivate what I would say that neutral ground, a lot of times I speak about how the ground's being formed through us from here. When we find ourselves, when we're willing to step into the emotions in that way and realize, what I call, we have agreements with it. So why would we be pushing against something that we clearly agree to? Because it's showing up. It's right here. So I'm curious, in your work with this, have you noticed how the emotions shift? And are you in communication with them in that way?
Yeah. So, being able to work with the layers and layers and letting them unfold, and especially through contemplation, which is being able to sit a subject out in front of you and let it do its thing. And it could be the subject of an emotional experience. So let me kind of go deep into something sort of more unpleasant. Perhaps a very beautiful friendship broke down and it ended terribly, right? And to the point where it felt like a wound. Well, letting that wound, because it keeps wanting to heal, it does want to heal. And instead of obsessing over it, which is more like digging into the wound than letting it heal, we let it unfold in front of us. And we allow the wounding and the feelings to exist. We notice them. We appreciate them. And then they begin to change and a new layer of petals opens and the wound gets to be really seen for what it was. And then new realizations from what had occurred that were more subtle start to unfold. And lots of different feelings coming up around these sorts of things, anger and grief and sadness and different kinds of pushback from ourselves, letting that unfold too, letting it exist, allowing it until it begins to become very, very neutral. And this is what we might call divine grace, right? So grace actually comes in and works on us with these layers. And they do feel like constructs. They feel like structures, but they're very kaleidoscopic, at least from my vantage point, which is to perceive these kinds of phenomena. And I don't feel them as much as say that I see them, but I feel them now, having practiced being able to perceive them with just my body alone is part of embodiment, which I know can be challenging because it doesn't feel good to let a flower that kind of stinks unfold in your field until you become so neutral about it. You begin to appreciate what you got out of it and you make some clear boundaries in consciousness. Then you make some new agreement and that begins to change your navigation and it gives you more experience instead of resentment. So then it doesn't keep collapsing in on itself anymore and turning into dense emotional structure that can then eventually and will turn into illness. Mm-hmm. So the contemplation of wounding is very key in this, I believe, in just letting the structure exist of whatever it is that you're examining. and to balance some stuff out too. Examine happy stuff too. I found that I can get really burned out on these processes. And so then you got to balance it out. You got to go have some fun. And I've been able to then say, all right, I've let this flower bloom. I've really paid a lot of attention to it. I've allowed it fully. But what's something that I can balance this out with? What's the opposite of this? And like a relationship that's become better over the years and more profound, and contemplating that and experiencing a whole other set of structure as it begins to unfold too. So as we walk through these things, these constructs, them actually revealing what we would call the fifth dimension to us, that a singular relationship or a singular event is never singular. It ripples out. It has a form to it, and it echoes through your life until you get to the ends of it and understand what the essence of it was in the first place. Then there's just the museum of appreciation of these things, because it's sort of like really treasuring the earlier part of your story, your book, the book of Elizabeth, saying, my gosh, like if I want to, I can flip back and really examine again and again some of the most extraordinary structures I've ever perceived in this lifetime, and being able to treasure that, even if it hurt. Being able to get to that point in time where you're like, that structure was incredible, wasn't easy, but on the end of it, coming out of that hall of experience, wow, I'm not the same. Yeah. And that's really key to this, to appreciate that moment and just being very present with that all the time, letting it show up.
Wow. Ooh, that's really deep. And I'm just breathing into every moment that, and I know so many people feel like they keep returning to the same thing. And I feel that to be our gift, that we get to feel and we get to see, we get to whatever sensory, intuitive ability or clair, that is the strongest for you, that you get to be that again. And I know when I find myself expanding or when something is coming in, because I work with, for a long period of time, lots of composites of, my oversoul integrating into the body. And with each one, it would open up my whole, what we'd call like the lower realm, right? And I'm like, okay, well, which of you match this? Which experience was it? So it can be that. And I love what you're presenting to us, because it really allows us, one, to know that there is a balance, that we can find balance, and inviting us into that. And, but still, I'm appreciating how you're holding the truth there of stand in it, be with it, feel it. And once again, just that gift of getting to return back. I know for me, and the levels that I touch and feel and see every day, like it doesn't turn off. It's so precious for me when I have an emotion that arises. Like, oh, okay, well, what is this? Wow. Part of me, that 6-year-old. Wow, what are you saying? What do you have to say here? The curiosity of that. And I know you're a seer, and as a seer myself, when something changes or something is like different, I'm like, whoa, I can't wait. Show me. Show me what that is. And what I found over time with what you're guiding us into today is that we are given so much more to work with, because we began to realize how responsible we are with it, because it becomes this like, wow, this is so precious, to have all those divine gifts, the grace, the understanding, to have that neutrality. It becomes this very precious thing. And you start to see how you influence everything around you. And what a gift it is that we get to walk here and do that, and get to watch what I say, like, the worlds of the realms open up for us, as we're navigating life. So I'm so grateful that you were here with us today, and everything that you're bringing through. I just feel this well that's been opened within the hearts of all of those that are tuning in here. And I can feel so many ahas and pieces lighting up. I would love to know, when it comes to people putting the divinity into action, to step out into, we can say, purpose, or that deep calling that they have to be in service right now. Is there any last messages that you may have for them?
Yeah, I like to give people something to contemplate and something to do.
Oh, I love it.
So first, the doing part, you definitely want to get to know your I am present. We don't really spend that much time on that because we're trying to reach this universal state, but you can't get to that universal state without including yourself. And I realized this through something very odd that happened to me as a psychic, kind of like you as well, can't turn it off, so you never know what's going to happen. And earlier last year, I get thrown into visions and that are, like you said, sort of from different places, either lower rooms or other, who knows, whatever shows up. So I'm in this section of what I call the Library of Consciousness, and I don't even remember where I was when I'm seeing this. And for me, it's very full body, so I can feel it and smell it and touch it and taste it, and it's very full sensory when I'm in a vision. And I'm in this part of this library that I love, this library, and I feel like I've, been there since the beginning of time, so it feels like home. But I'm in this part that I could not recognize, and I'm like, whoa, there's this whole new part of the library. So you get really excited for this kind of thing. And there's this big, huge cast iron gate, like huge. And it had these 12 locks on it. And all the locks were open. And I thought, wow, I don't even know what this means or what it entails, which is very much the life of the seer. You're not always supposed to know what you're looking at. And most of the time, you're not going to. You have to wait a while sometimes before you figure it out. But I realized later that these locks, they were sort of representative of different ages of humankind. And the reason I realized that was because I got to be able to see what was beyond this gate. And I could see this being of light, pure white and gold light, looking at this gigantic book. And a window behind them, they're off to the side, and this window beyond them with the most pure white light I've ever seen coming from this window, pouring through this room. And as I go up to this being, I realize this being looks at me, and I realize that it's me. And then I switched places, and now I am the being. And I understood in that moment why I was there. And it's the same reason why all of us are here. It's the same reason why everyone is here. All of you are here. You're in this part of consciousness too. One way or another, you worked really hard to be here. And as I got to know this place in consciousness, recognizing that I am not Elizabeth, but that I've worked very hard to have this life, to have checked out this book. And I had probably, picked this book way, way before I even got here and said, no, that one's got my name on it. And then falling in love with the book, but also falling in love with the space, realizing that for the first time that there was a window from the library into source, and realizing that all I wanted to do was go out of that window, not necessarily worried so much about the book. Now falling in love with what was creating the library in the first place. And I presented this idea to my teacher, and she said, Elizabeth, the window's inside of you. The window's here. And we call it the Cave of Brahma. But basically, the window is your Sushumna. It doesn't have to be just here. There's actually a Cave of Brahma in all different parts of your body, which is where your light's coming from. But getting to know that light that creates the whole library, falling in love with that part too, is your opportunity now. And to know who you are, you can go on that same psychic journey I just took you on through story. Or you can examine it through what you fear and what you love the most. Those triangulate your reality. If you really know what you yourself as an individual and really fears and really desires the most, it's going to point at who you are and what your purpose is. Then your attention's not on your fear and desire anymore. It's going to be on why you're here. What is the energy you came for? And it's going to be unique to you. And we need it to be unique, because if it's the same, then we get nothing done in consciousness. So use that journey to get to know who you are, what your essence is, what is your wavelength in consciousness, and be it. Just hang out with it. Do more of that presencing as well, because that's going to get you to perfect stillness faster than collapsing any polarity. And then the thing to contemplate, if you can recognize that consciousness is like a diamond, but it has endless facets, and that there's always going to be, from your vantage point, you're one of those facets. There's always going to be somebody opposite of you in reality. There's always going to be somebody who might be like the thing that you could not ever possibly understand ever. and then it's just so opposite of you in consciousness that it feels unbearable. Collapse that polarity too. Go to the middle, the consciousness that made you both, the divinity that is balancing you out with something else in the universe. And if you can work with those two ways, first by contemplating and understanding that you're perceiving from the facet and you want to go to that 13th spot in consciousness, which is the middle of the diamond, the very center of the diamond, where it's all appreciated and all perspective is available without preference. Contemplate that while seeking out this other piece, the fear and the desire that you have. You'll be able to step into the 12th and the 1st and live them more quickly. So this is my offer at the end of our call here, is these two tasks. One is very contemplative and one is very active. You're seeking out what you fear and desire most now. And then, of course, the contemplation, let them work together on you and see what happens. See what happens. See how much more perceptive of the divine inside of you and outside of you become more quickly.
Wow. Ooh. Oh, thank you. Thank you for leaving each one of us with that opportunity to seek out what we desire and what we fear and allowing for them to work on us. And I feel like you're offering such an incredible opportunity. And as each one of us take this in, leaving this space, I'm getting the sense of maybe spending a few moments in stillness and just being with what is arising, what is coming forward right now. Oh, and with that, just thanking Elizabeth here for being with us here in Divinity in Action. What a gift, what an honor to be here in this moment, sending each one of you so much love from the infinite and divine. Oh, goodbye for now.
Oh, beautiful hearts, let's take a moment here to breathe into yet another powerful message from our Divinity in Action alchemical movement. I hope you found the teaching shared in this episode to be enlightening and empowering. Also, that you will take space for yourself to work with what was offered for your discovery and growth. Once again, I invite you to unlock your divinity through the wisdom of our speakers and to harness this beautiful energy to your benefit that will increase abundance, clarity, and freedom in every aspect of your life. By experiencing Divinity in Action, we will break free from past programming and conditioning and fully embody our true selves.